often teach people about the kaba'ir, or the major sins, I usually ask people, what is the major sin? And normally people guess shirk, or which is polytheism, or some form of paganism, or some form of association of worship with something other than the Lord Most High. Surprisingly, when I ask people what is the next major sin, after number one being shirk, the sin which God will not forgive, meaning worshiping someone other than Him, the next major sin that people often don't realize, the second biggest sin, according to the Lord, is magic. Yes, magic. And why am I referring to magic? Because this concept of using magic, or using jinns, or using the supernatural world to commit acts that belong to the Lord is a form of shirk. It's a form of paganism. It's a form of misguidance. And this is why magic is the second major sin, because magic is a form of associating worship with something or someone other than the Lord Most High. And so in the story of Death Note, we have Laito, who finds the Death Note. And upon finding the Death Note, he is introduced to what the Japanese refer to as a shinigami. Now, a shinigami is what they translate to as a death god. Now, the specific death god, which is somewhat similar to a jinn, as I might have described. Now, in Islam, we have mankind created from earth or clay or mud, and we have free will and choice, and we have angels created from light, and they don't have free will and don't have choice. So contrary to the Christian belief, which is incorrect, angels do not have free choice or free will. But in addition to humans and angels, there are creatures created by Allah, by God, called the jinn. They are created from a smokeless fire, and they have free will. Now, strangely, in the story of Death Note, the shinigami is very much like a jinn. A evil-looking, winged creature, dark and deathly. For your enjoyment, here is a little clip from Death Note, from Death Note in English for you to enjoy.
So what'll happen to me? You're here to take my soul, right? Huh? What do you mean? Is that some fantasy you humans came up with? I'm not gonna do anything to you. The notebook becomes part of the human realm from the very moment it touches the earth. In other words, the notebook is now yours. This is mine. If you don't want it, just give it to someone else. But if you give it away, I'd have no choice but to erase your memories of the notebook. So then, you're saying I can use the Death Note all I want and I won't be punished? Let's just say this. You will feel the fear and pain known only to humans who've used the notebook. And when it's your time to die, it will fall on me to write your name in my Death Note. Be warned, any human who's used a Death Note can neither go to heaven nor hell for eternity. That's all. Now you have something to look forward to after you die.
Well, there you have it. We have Ryuk telling Laito about the rules of the Death Note. Now, an interesting thing he says at the very end is that those who use the Death Note shall not get to go to heaven or hell. Now, this is a strange Asian concept, somewhat similar to a purgatory concept, but that takes us down another tangent. We want to stick with this idea of the jinn and magic. Now, are there powers of the supernatural that can be gained from the jinn or from the shinigami in the supernatural world? And is something like a Death Note even possible? Well, I explained the concepts of shirk, polytheism or the kaba'ir, the major sins, and magic in the beginning of this section, because it's important to recognize that only Allah, the Lord, the Most High, has the power to take life. Now, that may sound a little strange. I mean, if I buy a gun and I go outside and find somebody and shoot them, can I take their life? Of course I can. That's not my point. But when I say the power to take life, meaning the ultimate power to ensure that someone will die no matter what, as Laita is experiencing, meaning the ability to actually cause someone's death by your will is something only that Allah can do. One of the concepts that we have from Islam is that the Prophet told us, the Prophet Muhammad, is that even if all of mankind and all of the jinn gathered together to cause you some harm, they would not be able to do so except for what had already been destined for you. Similarly, the Prophet said, if all of mankind and all of the jinn kind gathered together to do you some benefit, you could not get a benefit except for what God had already destined for you. So where does the concept of magic fit in? Is magic a viable option to kill someone? Strangely, the answer is yes. Magic does work. Certain forms of rituals or practices, if done in tribute to a shinigami or some kind of jinn, an evil of the jinn, will cause them to do acts on your behalf. But just as the anime tells you, a person who does that has sold their soul to the devil, as we may say in the West. And so this concept of being able to use the spiritual world for your benefit has repercussions. It has blowback. It causes you harm. Sometimes it works, sometimes it backfires and comes back towards you. Now here is a strange concept that is different between what the anime show Death Note talks about when we're referring to a shinigami and what we know from the truth of Islam, which is that there is an angel of death. Now, if you listen to some of the past Hot Conflict shows, you know that we've talked about the concept of the Grim Reaper. In the West, we call the angel of death, or the person who comes to take the soul away of the living, the Grim Reaper. And he's usually depicted like a shinigami, an evil, deathly skeleton creature with a hood and a sickle and a black robe. When in reality, the person who Allah, the Lord Most High, has assigned to take away lives is the angel of death. And an angel does not have free will. He follows the commands of his Lord and cannot choose to disobey, and cannot choose to take a life without being ordered to do so. And so here is one of the slight dichotomies in the reality of what really is true in the world and what is in the Shinigami realm of the Japanese horror. And so it's a strange little concept. Now, are there things, or are there actual spells that people cast to cause death? Well, a cursory view online would see that there are certain things like death spells. If you go online, you'll find some strange little tidbits. For example, here's a death spell. To do ill to those who have wronged you. Death spell. Get a sock or stocking belonging to your intended victim. Put graveyard dirt in it and bury it under the victim's front steps. In 3 weeks, the victim will be dead, having mysteriously withered away. Now, here is a supposed death spell. Whether it works or does not work is probably ludicrous even to talk about.